recording with Mr. Jared Knott on Sunday, March 12th, 2023 at 6:04 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm trying to remember to plug it as soon as I start the show. Guys, if you want to support the podcast, click on the little red button next to my name on Rumble. It's locals. You can go join there. I think you can support the podcast for like $5 a month if you want and get exclusive stuff. What that exclusive stuff will be, I have no idea. I haven't decided yet. But Mr. Knott has the patience of an angel. As I've now disclaimed over the last two episodes, the reason why there hasn't been shows is because I had a horrible panic attack and ended up in the hospital. And I'm not too proud of that. A 32-year-old man admitting that I turned into a baby, but it is what it is. And if I still seem a little off and maybe not as buttery smooth on the broadcasting, that is why. I don't know what the whole thing was, but Mr. Knott is you've had the patience of an angel, and you have been very welcoming to it. Told me I was doing a good job, so we're gonna try to ease back into this.
Very good.
Mr. Knott, please introduce yourself, my man.
Yes, I'm Jared Knott, and I'm the author of a best-selling book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. And I'm proud to say that it's done very well. It has been on the bestseller list for Amazon now for 27 months, which is unusual. It was sold over 20,000 copies, which is also very, very unusual. It's won 6 awards. So it's very, very pleased with the results there and the acceptance. I've had over 2,459, I think, the reviews so far. The vast majority have been positive. I got one of my favorite reviews just came through 2 or 3 days ago. This lady sent me an email that said that she had a friend who was being incarcerated and she wanted me to have something to read. So she gave him a copy of the book. He went into his incarceration, enjoyed it very much, was passing it around with the other prisoners. They all liked it very much. Okay. So I have an audience there I never even thought about. And of course, maybe the title and the subject matter, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, really resonates with the people who are guests of the state. So I'm doing no better about tiny mistakes and big blunders than they do. That was kind of a fun thing.
That's great. That's great.
Yes, that's right. I'd like to talk to them someday. But anyway, that's been a great experience. I'm hard at work on the sequel, which is the working title is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters #2. And the subtitle may be The Butterfly Effect in Human History, or even more tiny mistakes that changed the world forever. We're not sure, but it's a great wealth of mistakes out there, big, small, medium size. We concentrate, of course, on the small mistakes, which have had huge, huge catastrophic results. And it's kind of a novel, interesting way, I think, of looking at history. Most books, if you're running on Eisenhower or Ulysses S. Grant, whoever it might be, it's more of a straight drill down on the subject. This kind of turns history sideways. We look at it from a completely different perspective, from tiny mistakes that had ended up in catastrophes, going back to ancient times up to the present. So it's a novel, different way of looking at history, and it's a very fun book. It was a fun book to write, and it's a fun book to read, and I'm very gratified with the results so far.
And I was supposed to have it read, but as I've told you, the last couple of days kind of have not been what I was planned. One of the things I pride myself on is if I ever have on an author, I will have their book read by the time we do the show. And this is the first time I do not have it read. So we will schedule one, and I promise you I will read that book cover to cover, and I will go in and give it the love it requires. But because I haven't read it and I don't want to spoil the book and would like to give it a proper review, could we maybe examine some things going on right now, which I guess would be more speculative, right? Because this is all a history talking about blunders that led to this, Able Archer, 1983, or like a bear chewing on a wire outside of a missile silo. And they thought it was a lot of these things have happened before. Do you see maybe any parallels in the way we seem to be sleepwalking into World War III?
Well, yes, I wrote an article, in fact, about that very subject. I was talking about the war with China has already begun, and we are losing badly. I was talking about all the fentanyl coming across the border very cheaply. Again, why is it so cheap? Well, the Chinese are not trying to make money off of it. Their purpose is to tear down the United States. It's made very cheaply, sold to the cartels very cheaply, imported, very inexpensive price. And it's led to an explosion in those people dying from overdoses. the fentanyl in particular, because of the cheapness and the availability of fentanyl, it was a big boom last year in 2022, and a shift in the drug preference from heroin a little bit more over to the fentanyl. But it's an attack on the United States. That's the whole purpose of it, and it's like a war. In fact, more people have died in the last 3 years from fentanyl overdoses than died in the last 3 wars. If you take the number of people killed in Korea and Vietnam and Desert Storm, Desert Shield, total is about 81,000. We've had, it's hard to say, we don't know exactly, but 160 some odd thousand killed by drug overdoses in the last 3 years. So the casualties are greater from this war than from the shooting wars of the last 3 or 4 shooting wars that we've had. And it's, make no mistake about it, it's being done by the Chinese to damage the United States and to tear at the fabric of our society.
And in terms of little blunders, do you think one day we'll look back at something like Ukraine or Taiwan and it will hold the same weight as Gavrilo Princip and Franz Ferdinand?
Well,
very loaded question.
Well, if you look at the Wuhan mistake, okay, and by the way, I wrote another article talking about how 2 of the biggest medical developments of the last 100 years both came as a result of mistakes in the laboratory. One very good, the one very bad. Alexander Fleming, interesting story. He was going on vacation to Scotland. He worked at St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1928, and he is kind of known for keeping a sloppy lab. So he took his dishes, petri dishes in this case, put it in the sink. It's bacteria smeared all over him. Goes out to Scotland for 2 years. That's right, 2 weeks. Comes back, and so it's time to clean up the sink, and he pulls it out, and lo and behold, a penicillin mold that's landed right in the middle, one of the petri dishes, and killed all the bacteria around it. What is this? What is this? That means there's something in penicillin that is able to kill bacteria, and that was a gigantic breakthrough. Not only was it the discovery of penicillin, it was also the discovery of the entire field of antibiotics, and tens of millions of lives have been saved. It took a number of years to get it where it was functional and could be administered as medicine all the way to 1942, but it saved millions of lives in World War II. It saved tens of millions of lives since, the entire field of antibiotics. Okay, that's the good one. The bad one is the Wuhan lab that we think, I guess, by accident. And by the way, there's some people who say maybe it was German warfare, maybe the Chinese let it escape intentionally. There are some people that say that. I just can't. Surely not. Surely not. I want to say it's not possible. Surely. But anyway, that of course has cost the lives of over 10 million people so far, and still counting. Both of them mistakes in the laboratory. So that's a tiny mistake that was a huge blunder that's had catastrophic results.
I guess another wouldn't be a blunder. Maybe it'd be a blunder for Hitler, but it'd be someone like Leo Szilard leaving Germany to come to the United States to warn Einstein and FDR about the Germans building a uranium bomb.
Yes, I'm not familiar. I knew that warning came through, and then Franklin Roosevelt, kind of late in his administration, of course he was selected to 4 terms, he served 3, smoked, drank, and was not at the top of his game in 41, 42, 43. But it was explained to him that we need to invest a lot of money in developing this atomic bomb and beat the Germans to it. By the way, based on what I read, this is Bill O'Reilly as my source there, it could very well be that the Germans had, in fact, exploded a small atomic device in a tunnel back before the end of the war. But having the technology is one thing, having huge resources and all the uranium and the plutonium available to build a bomb was another issue altogether. So it could be that they were actually a step ahead of us in terms of technology. The atom was first split, by the way, at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, not at the University of Chicago. So technologically speaking, they were a step ahead, but in terms of massive resources necessary to develop an atomic weapon, they did not have that wherewithal. So that was and of course, Roosevelt approved the development, and Oppenheimer, of course, involved in the whole thing. And thank gosh that came through. The Germans are lucky it wasn't dropped on them. They're lucky it was dropped on the Japanese.
Now, and as I said, I will email you after this, and we'll schedule an episode where I I read the full book. Um, could you though, without giving away much of the book, is there a common theme you have seen in these? Is there a, although they're in different eras and they're involving different actors and different weapons or chemicals or biologics, some during war, some during peacetime, is there any similarity you see between these quote unquote butterfly effect scenarios? Is there anything that would allow one to maybe start to identify them before they happen? Or is that just
Well,
wishful thinking?
yes, in the beginning of the book, and also at the end of the book, I address preventing tiny mistakes. I talk about the Dusty Fleiss was this naval pilot. He was a naval bomber, and he talked about all the steps he went through before going into battle. He had to have a certain kind of Vaseline. He had to have a certain kind of white cloths. He had to have a certain kind of pencils. He had to have plastic chart. He had all these things 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Went down the checklist. Had his headgear, and finally he was ready to go into battle. A big emphasis, just like the Boy Scouts, on being prepared. And so he made very few tiny mistakes when the naval crossed there at Midway. At the end of the book, kind of interesting story. There was a doctor named Atul Gawande. He's world famous now, but he was looking at the operating room. And he said the way it worked back then in the beginning was you get about 7 or 8 years under your belt. Then you go in there in the operating room and just go by gut instinct as to what you think is the best thing to do at the time. He said, but we're human, we make mistakes, and those mistakes, of course, can lead to fatalities. So what can we do to reduce the mistakes that are being made? And he said, I wonder how the airline industry has handled the same question. They have to deal with great complexity, split-second decisions being made. So I wonder how they handle it. He went over, he spoke to the people at Boeing and went back to a famous airplane accident way back in 1935 with a prototype of the Flying Fortress, which is the B-17, which was called the B-99 experimental plane at the time. Well, there was 2 very, very good pilots. In fact, 2 of the very best pilots that Boeing had, and they made a mistake. They forgot to turn off the elevator yoke, which caused the plane to stall, and it pancakes down, and both the pilot and the co-pilot were killed. A very small mistake. So they were saying, well, gee, one of our best pilots, how can we prevent this from happening in the future? And they went back to an ancient tool, the humble checklist. Okay. And so they said, all right, then, here's 37 or 43 items, whatever it is. Here's a pilot, here's a co-pilot, turn such and such a dial at such and such a position, check, check. Take the elevator yoke and turn it in the off position, check, check, and on down the list so that there's nothing that gets through. Human beings can think about just one thing at a time. You have to make sure that you're going to be thinking about all 37 of those items and you don't miss a single one. The checklist is critical. Checklists are now, have been for many years, extremely, extremely basic for pilots to make sure that all the different things that have to be done are taken care of. So Atul Gawande came back and he applied this new system in the operating room. He also discovered, kind of as a sidelight, that when the people in the operating room knew each other's name, okay, that improved communication. That was also good for the survival of the patient. They wanted to speak up, but doctor, what about so and so, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, but they got terrific results. Where fatalities dropped 36% as a result of this program. Fatalities. And so we're talking about how that have been saved by this more efficient system. You're building a birdhouse, you're building a garden in the backyard, the checklist, the preparation, that sort of thing applies to almost any job function that you undertake, whether private or in your personal career.
Is there any scientific backing behind why? I understand the checklist. I have my own daily checklist, and despite doing it for 1,000 days in a row with this podcast, I still find myself, looking at it at the end of the day and realizing I've missed something. But that verbalizing of the name, why is that? If you could guess, why is that? Is it? I mean, it makes sense, but I couldn't explain it if I wanted to. But I feel like that does, to verbalize someone's name.
Oh, well, yeah, it opens up communication. here's the big doctor. Here I'm just a nurse, that sort of thing. I don't want to get him mad. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. So I'll just be quiet in the background. But if you have introduced yourself, my name is John, my name is Mary, my name is Bill, whatever it is, it kind of opens up a communication line between the doctor and the people working on his team, and they're more likely to speak up, more likely to communicate than they were when no one's introduced themselves. It's a small thing, yet it's a big thing at opening up the communication door. So encourage a kind of a team effort that may not have been there before.
Now, is that something, like you said, is that something that is common in the little blunders, though?
There's such a range of mistakes. In some cases, the mistake is that a small mechanical device failed to function. Well, what went wrong? How did it go wrong? Did they wire it strongly enough? Did they build it exactly the right way? But you don't know. In some cases, it's just sloppiness or negligence. Some cases, the document looks like it's perfectly good from the designer's perspective, but if it's proofread by other people, they're more likely to pick up the mistakes that took place. So it runs the full gamut of human mistakes, cross-checking, having it proofread, being aware of the fact that human beings make mistakes, and if you don't have a type preparation, type review program, there's going to be mistakes in your work. Just know that's going to happen. So that attitude to preventing and being alert to mistakes is a very important factor.
You think that that's almost like a self-limiting reagent based in, it seems to be just the laws of reality on how large societies or groups of people should reach in terms of to-do lists and being familiar with names? Is that almost like a primitive upper limit on the size of people that should be in a town? Like once you get to a massive corporation or a flight line with 10,000 people building a stealth bomber, is that some weird, are we essentially like building the Tower of Babel? Are we going against what is like what man is for? Just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that came up. They're talking about reducing fatalities in the operating room. Has it become so complex it's beyond human ability to handle it? Well, no, at least not at the first level. It's not. You have a good, practical, workable system so that human abilities can be properly coordinated and focused to deal with all the mistakes. That it works quite well. Now, paralleling what you're saying, you find in business that when a business, it can be a number of different categories, gets to about the $5-6 million level, right in there, it's too complex for one individual to be able to supervise everything. At that level, to get bigger, generally speaking, you have to bring in managers that you delegate to managers. They must take over more of the responsibility if you're going to try to make it to 10 million, because one person can't manage the system at going to 10 million by themselves. They're going to have help with managers and supervisors that they have to in turn supervise. So there's another level of management that has to be added. That's a big barrier for many companies. They reach that level and they don't want to or cannot go any higher. And those that are successful, they're very successful, like grow to be 2,000 stores like Home Depot and so on and so forth. They find a way of having supervisor managerial systems that can handle the greater, more complex challenges that they face. But something else, though, completely different subject, but it has bearing on your question, is that are the workers, American workers, working as hard as they used to? There's something called soft quitting, where, well, I'm not going to quit. I just keep getting the paycheck, but I just got to take it easy here, and I won't bust my hump to make sure things are done right. That, of course, is we made America a strong, great country because we worked hard, we're very diligent, and a good, strong work ethic. Well, if we lose that, the Chinese may be breathing right down our neck, and we may find ourselves in long-term trouble. Hopefully, now that the federal checks that have been passed around have kind of run out now, okay, hopefully there'll be kind of a hunger and a need for financial preservation that will motivate people to go back to the American work ethic that made us the great country that we are.
Could you then say that's almost then not just for a company? It seems like that's the limiting reagent for an empire, right? I mean,
yes.
What do we have? Something like 820 military bases around the world. There's a great book called Based Nation by David Vine, and it goes into that entire labyrinth all around the world, and the supply lines and the Defense Logistics Agency and Air Mobility Command. Yeah, it seems like that'd be directly correlated to the ability to run an empire.
Yes. Now, I will speak up for us in saying that we made our list of mistakes. Historically, we made some ugly
Oh,
mistakes,
sure, sure.
but um, our bases are almost all defensive. We have
Yeah,
no interest of gaining new territory, invading another country, taking on another. We have just zero interest there. Our main interest is protecting what we have, protecting our allies, and protecting a country that has free elections and freedom in it. And those people on the other side, which would be the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans, they have it's a basic need in human nature, the desire or need for domination. Okay, domination and the avoidance of domination is just part of human nature. You go back through history, there's been one conqueror after another, who wants to build a big empire and build a big ego in connection with his accomplishments, so he can look at all these surveys and he's the dominant leader. That same motivation is behind what is happening with the Chinese and what's happening with the Russians and North Korea. It's unfortunate, but there's two ways of having the tallest skyscraper in town. You can build the tallest skyscraper, or you can tear down the other skyscrapers, or you can do both. Well, the Chinese, of course, are trying their very best to tear down our skyscraper. They want to be the dominant country. Now, I'll make this statement that rarely, there are exceptions, but rarely is a democracy an aggressive force. And there's exceptions. But usually what the voters want, give us hospitals, give us schools, give us jobs, give us security, give us a nice home, a nice neighborhood. That's what we want. Dictator, and he wants a lot more than that. He wants to rebuild the Soviet empire. He wants to become the dominant force in the Pacific. He wants to undermine the other nation that's at this point ahead of his, maybe. And so they have a completely different motivation. If the people of China could be given all the facts and to vote openly, they would, without any doubt, vote for democracy and for human rights, etc. People in North Korea would love to be, if they knew the true situation, love to be like South Korea instead of in the great repressive regime that they live in. Same thing with the Soviet Union. Putin is popular, but if the people of the Soviet Union had all the facts laid out in front of them, they wouldn't want to be invading Ukraine. They wouldn't want a dictatorship either. They would want peace, hospitals, schools, etc. Why is it that they're not being able to get it? There's a great quote, horrible quote from Adolf Hitler. Nothing overcomes reason so quickly as terror and force. There was kind of a democratic movement there in China. A lot of people protesting. Well, they have murder gangs and they have police gangs, secret police go around and stuff out those people very quickly. Mr. Putin was talking about maybe the oligarchs or some people in his government would come behind him and depose him because he's made such a mess of the situation in Ukraine. Well, no, he's got his murder squads, and they're experts at poisoning people, they're experts at shooting people, they're experts at making it look like suicidal, but everybody knows better. And there's a kind of comical, kind of a callous humor kind of word called defenestration. I learned recently. What is that? That's throwing somebody out of a window. Well, there have been a couple, 3 cases. Someone jumped out of a 6-story window in a hospital and committed suicide or whatever like that. He's killed a dozen or more of the oligarchs. There was one of them, well, this is interesting, would come to the United States, Washington, D.C., living in an expensive high-rise right there in Washington, D.C.
Bed
Well,
Bath and Beyond guy.
yeah, it's got to be safe, right? I mean, here's the White House down here, here's the FBI right here. They wouldn't dare come over here and murder right here. Well, yes, they would. Yes, they would. Just as dead as the people that were killed in Europe. So he's got himself covered in terms of those people behind him are all dead, and he's in firm control of his country, and there's no stopping him. He's the dictator that nobody is going to be able to reach.
So it seems an alternative to the problem of logistically going past that quote unquote $6 million mark or whatever that stands for in terms of empire. You can get around it by not working harder, but by quote unquote working smarter, smarter being brutality, death. Oh, you're going to do this, or what did the Russian mob used to do? Like, they wouldn't hurt you, but they would kill your family and mail you their body parts. Yeah, man, that's a motivational factor. That is how you would keep an empire in line.
Yeah, that's why so many countries where the citizens clearly, Iran would be an example, would like to have a democracy, but when they start to move in that direction, of course, they got terror and force, they got the gangs, they got the hoodlums, they've got people specialized in murder that single out those people who are leaders of that kind of movement, and they end up dead over and over again. It's a sad situation. It's too bad. There's a great quote from Eisenhower. People want democracy and peace so much that one day a government's going to step out of the way and let them have it. Well, yes, they want democracy, they want peace, but it's hard to get to Putin and the Chinese leadership to step out of the way. It's going to take, I know it's going to take, it may not ever happen.
But if it did happen, just putting on our thinking caps, how do you think it would happen? Would it be by military force, or would it be by some new revolutionary commercial quality of or standard of life?
Maybe if the current leaders die of some natural cause, and maybe the person who takes them place would be less terrorist oriented. I'll tell you too, in that subject, China came very close to being a democracy, except for mistakes in the book, except for a mistake made by Woodrow Wilson back at the 1919 Versailles Treaty. China would be probably a democracy. India's a democracy, South Korea's a democracy, Japan's a democracy. China could have been a democracy also. I'll tell you the story quickly.
Take your time.
Okay. It was at the, of course, the end of World War One. The winners they all wanted their share of the spoils. The Chinese had sent 100,000 workers to France to dig trenches, which was a very valuable contribution that they made. The Japanese had defeated the Germans on the Pacific Ocean, and they wanted their slice of the pie also. Now, here's what the Japanese wanted. The Germans had concessions on mainland China. There's certain areas of China that they controlled and they ran, and there's several other European countries that had the same thing. Well, Japan wanted to take over the German concessions so they could have that to themselves, number one. And number two is very important. They wanted a statement in the Versailles Treaty that all peoples of the world would be given equal rights by all governments, that all individuals, regardless of their ethnic background, regardless of their citizenship, would be treated equally and be given equal rights. Well, to the 21st century era, I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world, right? Well, not so fast. The senators in the Western United States, California, Oregon, and Washington State, they were concerned about immigration from Japan and other places coming in to the Western United States and taking jobs away from American citizens. So the senators there were opposed to that equality statement. Also down in Australia, there was a very irascible man named Tony Hughes. Okay, Tony Hughes, and he and Woodrow Wilson butted heads right away. Okay, Woodrow Wilson called him a pestiferous varmint. Okay, and when the United States calls it pestiferous varmint, pretty serious. And then for his part, Tony Hughes would say to President Wilson, "I speak for 60,000 Australian dead, Mr. President. How many do you speak for?" All right, so they're button heads. But anyway, he was very much opposed to the statement of equality also. Australia, even to this day, thinks of itself as a white island floating in an Asian sea. They did not want a lot of Asian immigration coming to their country either. So when it came down to it, Woodrow Wilson, he needed the votes of the senators in the Western United States to get his League of Nations bill passed, which, by the way, failed anyway. But he needed their votes. So he caved in primarily to the senators, and he told the Japanese, "I'm sorry, we cannot give you your statement of equality, okay, various reasons, but we can let you have the concessions on China as kind of a trade-off, kind of a sop. You can't have one thing, but you can have the other. However, hold it, very important." Wilson's 14 points, one of the main points of his 14 points was local determination. The countries would not have foreign powers come in and dominate them and take over part of their country. It was one of the main points that he promised. Okay, so this is a point blank violation of what he promised the entire world. Well, the dates are important. It was announced on May 3rd that the Japanese were going to take over the German concessions. On May 4th, there was a huge outbreak, demonstrations all across China. That was the beginning of the now famous or infamous May 4th movement. And one of the Chinese nationalists said, "We have believed in Woodrow Wilson and the Western democracies, then we decided they were all great liars. Okay, so they rejected Woodrow Wilson, they rejected democracy, and coming out of Russia at that time was another philosophy called communism. So it took a number of years. Mao Zedong took over the movement. Took a number of years, but that movement took over China and defeated Chiang Kai-shek, and they became a communist dictatorship. If he had not made that one mistake, if he'd said that whatever to the Japanese, you can't have it. And by the way, they only kept it 2 or 3 years, couldn't do much with it because the Chinese were not being very cooperative, so they got nothing out of it. If they'd said no, you can't, that would give you whatever statement, whatever. Anyway, that would have made a big difference, and it's very, very possible that China would be a democracy today. Imagine how different the world would be if China were a democracy.
Well, that was brilliant. Weren't there some like irregularities in LBJ getting the vice president nomination?
Well, now I'm not anti-LBJ, but
Oh no, just examining if we're just examining historical blunders. No, it's not objectively.
Yeah. But I mean, I was going to say he was, of course, a big wheeler dealer. There were all kinds of deals being made, all kinds of money being exchanged, et cetera, et cetera. He was involved with Brown and Root, which was a big
Kellogg Brown Root. Yeah,
he was paid a lot of money.
Giving out all the NASA contracts.
But yeah, NASA being, of course, in Houston as a result, which by itself is not unethical. His 1948 election was clearly stolen, and to be fair, 4 years earlier, I think the Senate race was stolen by the other side. So he may have had one stolen from him if he stole one back. 1960, very clearly, in Texas and Missouri and in Illinois, there was definite voter theft that took place there. So there was, there was all kinds of wheels really dealing going on. Kennedy's, of course, involved in that as well. He was, and there was like a couple of chapters on LBJ. He came close to losing the 1948 Central election, in which case they would have kept him from becoming a Senate Majority Leader and would probably have never been president of the United States. So he was and also, too, I talked in the book, I talked on an article written, Eisenhower, to his great credit, did not lose one single American soldier's life the entire 8 years that he was president. There were several different situations. There were challenges. One of them was the possibility of going into Vietnam. He had a Blue Ribbon Commission to review all that was details, all that was involved. It was a terrible place. Land war in Asia, in the jungles of Vietnam, is the worst place to want to fight communism, blah, blah, blah. So he avoids the war. LBJ, there's a conversation with him recorded with Robert McNamara back in 1962 or 3. Anyway, he says to him, Bob, this current chief of Joint Chief of Staff is not going to do what we want. We'll get somebody else. But I want somebody to put a plan together and go over there and whip the hell out. Now, there's that big contrast in the way Eisenhower approached the situation and the way LBJ approached the situation. Let me mention, too, I'm from Texas, proud to be a citizen of Texas, Georgia now. But there are 2 wars that could have been avoided over the last 60 years. At least 2. And one of them was Vietnam, the other one is Iraq. In both cases, we had a Texan who was president of the United States. Now, of course, you never know, but if we had a president there from Vermont or North Dakota or Wyoming or someplace like that, the wars could have been avoided. Okay, but they were from Texas, and back when we were in elementary school, we were taught about the Alamo, we were taught about San Jacinto, we were talking about the Texas freedom, so on and so forth. And it's kind of ingrained in us by God to go out there and whoop the hell out. So that's kind of course, you get into speculation there. But I think LBJ's approach was a little bit too belligerent. If we had Eisenhower still president, the war might have been avoided.
Do you think we would have seen, again, just pure speculation, do you think we would have seen a different outcome or response to 9/11 had Gore been in office as opposed to, I was only 10, so I barely remember that election, but I do remember the hanging chads. Would that qualify as a small enough blunder?
Well, yes. In fact, there's a chapter in the book, and the teaser is one single document designed by one single clerk in one single county changed the outcome of the presidential election and led directly to a major war. The war would not have taken place except for the single tiny mistake, which sounds like, God, what in the world? It had to do with the butterfly ballad down in Palm Beach County. And it's not the hanging chads. It's something that most people don't know about. And this nice lady, intelligent lady, I won't say her name, but she designed a ballot down there with big print so the older voters could see it easily. There was a left page and a right page with a series of punch holes down the center. Okay. Well, it's a poorly designed ballot. Al Gore's name was the number 2 name on the left-hand page, but he was the number 3 punch hole. The number 2 punch hole belonged to Pat Buchanan on the right page. Well, very confusing. A lot of people voted for Pat Buchanan. Some people made a mistake and they punched the second punch hole. That had validated the ballot, about 5,000 invalidated ballots. And anyway, Al Gore lost the state by like 556 votes. Oh. He would have won it by maybe 5 or 6 or 7,000 votes. He would have won Florida. He would have won the presidency. He was adamantly, unlike Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, he was adamantly opposed to the war in Iraq. The war would not have taken place. And they had this nice lady on one of the morning talk shows, and they were saying to her, people are saying that you're responsible for this war. And she was in tears. And someone said, well, madam, we appreciate the fact that you're crying. But we have 50,000 dead people and $2 trillion in expenditure lost because of one single tiny mistake.
Lord.
That's what the book is all about.
Yeah, no, it's and again, like I said, this is the first time I've had on an author and have not read the book, and it's because I guess my own tiny blunder, big mistakes is me having a panic attack. So I really do apologize about that, but I'm enjoying our talk thus far. Could it even be said it's her fault then? I mean, if the system's that fragile, then if it wasn't a butterfly ballot, it would have been a flat tire on the delivery truck that brought in could that almost be seen as a devil's advocate argument?
Well, if there's a margin for safety, if Al Gore had won 2 or 3 additional states, or he had another 50,000, something like that, but it was razor thin. And that's when tiny mistakes sometimes could really make a difference. That little tiny mistake that right on the edge of the fence and flipped it the other direction. Now, of course, it was President Bush who decided to go to war. He made that decision. He has that responsibility. But except for that tiny mistake, it would have been Al Gore, and there would have been no war. Most people agree, even though Republicans and I'm a Republican too, but may hate to admit it, but we would have been better off if that entire war had been skipped. It was the business about, it was the business about they were close to nuclear weapons, close to terrible weapons of mass destruction. We got in there and realized, no. They had been kind of bluffing, trying to give the impression to their neighbors they had a nuclear program. They had a very primitive nuclear program, nowhere near being developed into a nuclear weapon. Their weapons of mass destruction were primitive also. They had missiles from the early 60s that were decayed and deteriorated, blah, blah, blah. There was no justification to go to war there in the first place.
Yeah. And then you wonder, are the entrenched military interests in this country, are they even concerned with little tiny blunders? Like, were we going to go to Vietnam regardless? Were we going to go to Iraq regardless? And it does seem to be that that's the major driving force behind the left-right is, back to Eisenhower and 30 years before him, Smedley Butler, war is a racket, war is big business. You almost wonder if it was going to go ahead anyway.
Well, of course, Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. Our current military, I have the impression, it leans a little bit left, and they are not the bellicose people that might have been there in the 50s or 60s trying to build up the military. They're kind of on a retreat from any kind of Vietnam or any kind of situation like that. And now that we have, it's kind of funny, the belligerent side of the issue is the side of the Democrats, and the Republicans are the ones saying, gee whiz, we want to fight this long, protracted war. Should we try to get out of it? Should we try to force the Ukrainians into a peace deal, et cetera? So it's kind of flip sides from the
it is
50s,
odd.
60s, 70s.
It's very odd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you almost wonder if something as tiny as, or I don't know, like the Chinese spy balloon, like that had a feeling of like, could this be some moment in a history book we're reading about 50 years from now that led to World War III?
Like, I don't of course, there are a lot of little mistakes that lead
Sure.
to nothing. And this,
Yeah.
so I don't think that's going to trigger anything. We do have a very, very serious situation, as you know, in Taiwan. Chinese have a larger navy than we do. They don't mind they're spending more and more on their the military. We are hesitant to spend more on our military. I'm not sure we can win a war. Dr. Jack Keane was talking about the situation there, and other people saying, I'm not sure we could win a war if they were to attack Taiwan. I'm not sure we have to make a big strategic decision. Maybe give some weapons and some training to the Taiwanese and say, we're not stepping across the line. And it's like the Ukrainians, we're not going to send American troops there. It's if we're going to defend your island, you're going to do it with just the weapons that we give you and hope for the best. Maybe that's the decision to send American troops into Taiwan and go on head to head with the Chinese. That's a big, big decision. I don't know. Maybe we I don't know. It's a difficult kettle of fish to try to resolve.
Didn't China just cut off like all the internet cables to Taiwan like the last couple of days?
I have not heard that. Of course, we're moving a lot of our manufacturing out of China to India and other places. So there's a kind of scramble going on. China's economy is not doing particularly well, but the people don't have any voice in their government for major decisions, so it can do not so well. And as long as the leaders Xiao Ping is happy doing what he's doing, then that's not going to change it.
I guess another small thing that hasn't really, not yet, knock on wood, is the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
They all seem like little powder kegs that aren't going anywhere, but chance only favors us so many times before a tiny blunder does turn into something huge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you think we survive the next couple of years without going into a full global thermonuclear holocaust?
Surely.
I know that's a big question.
Well, it's a touchy situation. The Chinese and the Russians have hypersonic missiles that cannot be shot down by our Patriot anti-missile missiles. We're behind on that, and we're just in the testing stages where they're some years down the road. So if we were to get, God forbid, into a nuclear war, they would. I don't know what the outcome would be if they both have hypersonic missiles and we don't. We just want to say surely, because we still have missiles that can hit their country and destroy their military, just so they can destroy our military, be mutually assured destruction. So surely not. However, good chance that we may have an attack on Taiwan, and we have to make the decision: do we let the Taiwanese fight it out, or we try to go in and defend the Taiwanese? The Navy may not be equal to the task of defending Taiwan. So it's a tough situation.
Could you go into, because I did read on the I guess the cover or the back of the book, the one example. We can do one spoiler alert. You say small metal device didn't operate correctly in World War II.
Yeah. Yes. It seemed like, we make the point there in the book, into the turmoil in Germany in the 1920s, it seemed like there was some evil demonic force protecting him against harm all those years. And one of them was, and there was a German general conspiracy to assassinate him.
Valkyrie.
And they had, what they had done, they had put together a explosive device inside of a gift box. It looked like a bottle of liquor. They were able to lure Hitler there to Russia for a big meeting, reviewing the strategies and so on and so forth. When he's getting back on his plane, one of the conspirator generals get a bottle to a person. Give this to General so and so back in Berlin. It's a gift. It's a gift bottle of liquor. It's an explosive device, 4.5 inch long triggering device, so that once the acid eats through, it's going to firing pin is going to fire. It sets off the explosion. Hitler's whatever it is, 5,000 feet in the air, and it's killed. Okay, so put on. Okay, Hitler, while they take off, and you imagine the tension on the ground, pacing back and forth. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. Okay. And so anyway, but 3 or 4 hours later, the plane lands without incident. Oh my gosh, what happened? And if somebody opens up that liquor bottle and find out it's an explosive device, it's going to be all hell to pay. So they're able to get back there. hold of it, bring the device back, and it was just one little device, not wide. It was not built quite right. It was some kind of defect or something like that. But one of my favorite figures in history saying at one point the generals are going to just give up. He said that from the Russian front, he was saying it is almost certain that we will fail, but we should go ahead with the attempts to assassinate Hitler so that the people of the world will know and people of future generations will know that there are men inside Germany willing to lay down their lives to oppose Hitler and the evilly represented. He's not only the enemy of Germany, he's the enemy of the entire world. So there are noble men willing to sacrifice their lives only to make a major point.
That is kind of badass.
Penny von Tresco.
That's a pretty cool story. Mm-hmm. That's actually really badass. I like that. Yeah.
And there was another of the many times when Hitler came close to death, and there was a this is going to be the second book. There was a British soldier, okay, who was in a position to shoot Hitler and several of the other German prisoners in World War I. Hitler was saying later, he said, I thought that I was never going to see Germany again. It looked like this was going to be the end. But the British soldier proved to be noble. He did not shoot the prisoners there. And so Hitler survives, comes back to Germany, and of course, would have World War II. But if he had been a little bit more cold-hearted, of course, that we get into all kinds of ifs and what ifs, that sort of thing. But that's just one of the number of examples. We just nearly escaped death here, nearly escaped death there.
Didn't he barely escape like an artillery shell as well in World War I?
Well, he was had mustard gas damage, and I'm not sure about that shell, but there was another case. It was 1939, shortly after the invasion of Poland, and there was a man who was working on this by himself. And he got up into the upper bulkhead over the stage of this big beer hall, and he carved out an area there and planted an explosive device there, set the timer on it, and it was going to go off at a certain time at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the evening on that particularly Saturday night or Monday night, whatever it was. Okay, the time comes and there was rain. If we try to fly back to Berlin, we're not going to be able to because of the weather. We need to go by train. We need to leave early, mein Führer. Okay, so he leaves about 13 and a half minutes before the bomb exploded. If it hadn't been the rainy weather, okay, and planned on flying back, he'd have stayed another 30 minutes or hour. It would have blown up. It would have killed him. It killed the men around him. It would have killed him also, and there would have been no World War II. Hermann Goering was opposed to the war. He was looking for a way for a peaceful outcome. The whole thing would not happen, but it was not to be. It was not to be.
Have you ever read Blitzed by Norman Ohler?
Yes, I read part of it. Yes, that's right. And I mentioned that in the book. Beginning about 1941, Hitler seemed to begin to lose control and make a lot of irrational decisions. And he would fly off in these rages and speak for an hour and a half of these euphoric things, how we're going to destroy the world, how we're going to conquer. Even when the war was going bad, here he was kind of going off in these weird fantasies, expounding and bloviating and so on and so forth. And Dr. Morell was giving him
Eucadol.
Well, he was amphetamines and also heroin, apparently, out of my bunker, goes out of the bunker. And when a lot of the high Nazis used drugs, a lot of the military used drugs also, but this judgment became somewhat irrational in that period. His decision to declare war in the United States, not a good decision. His war really to invade Russia, not a good decision. And a lot of his decisions all through there, where he'd been rational before, got pretty nutty. I guess we're lucky that he was a little tilted, because his generals might have been able to do much better than he did.
Wasn't Goering the chancellor of the Luftwaffe?
Who? Goering. Yes, he was. He was a famous fighter pilot
in World War
I, and then he was in charge of Luftwaffe in World War II.
And he was heavily addicted to morphine and had his own custom syringe and custom deerskin case. And apparently, on the morning of the miraculous retreat for Dunn, he had actually used his authority and his, companionship with Hitler to call off the tanks pursuing. And he said he wanted it to be a glorious Luftwaffe victory, and that they were going to bomb him on the beaches. This is according to Norman Ohler's book. And it's I mean, there's another example, allegedly, if it's true, that this guy's grandiose views in his morphine-soaked brain led to the miraculous retreat at Verdun. Just another tiny little thing that butterfly effect into a massive influence on the war. I think you're frozen up. Mr. Knott.
The sand would able to, it's 330 in North Africa, and the Germans might be able to conquer them easily because this is 130, but it made a difference in the war.
Well, for now we're running up on 5 minutes to go. Mr. Knott, I'm going to send you an email right after this, and I'd like to schedule you some back on here sometime this week. And I promise you, I'm going to read through your book, and we're going to give it the proper rundown, because it sounds like something very much so like. And I really don't like having someone on here and having not read their book. I feel slimy. I feel like I haven't done my half of the bargain. And so I'd love to get you back on here ASAP, and I will give you a proper.
Don't let it worry. If it leads to a second chance,
do what?
I appreciate that very much.
Yes,
and I'll mention too, this is, I guess, the time here, but you can go to my website, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. Here we are here. Anyway, you have 2.5 free chapters there. We have the book trailer, and we have one of my favorite parts of the book is the portrait gallery that has 27 personalities with a little bit of dirt on each one. I'm actually kidding about that, but I had dirt just on 2 or 3 or 4 of them. But anyway, it's kind of a fun thing to visit. You get 2.5 free chapters, and you can get the electronic version of the book for just $2.99. We're running a special now. So it'd be kind of a fun experience just for the website by itself.
Beautiful. And I've already put the website in the description as well as your Twitter. And I will send you an email right after this, and we'll schedule the next one.
I appreciate it very much. I enjoy it.
Thank you so much for being on here, sir. Guys, thank you for watching. I will email you in just a minute. Thank you so much. God bless.